the minutes of, well, two sets of minutes. The first one being the formal meeting of the 15th of March. Are we to note these, Dan?
That's right.
We are to note them. Okay, that's the 15th of March. When, well, yes, 15th of March. We were meeting via Teams then, as opposed to the previous March, of course. And then there are the notes of the informal meeting, which we had on the 28th of June. Are there any comments on this? Tim?
Thank you very much, Chair. I believe, as is faithfully recorded in the minutes, I raised the issue of Perry Bar Station.
Mm-hmm.
I think I also very clearly raised the issue of University Station in the minutes.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem to be reflected. Could it be reflected for the record?
Okay. Can we do two addendums now? We're still headed for, well, in the forward plan, to focus on the Commonwealth Games Strategic Transport Plan. That will be on the morning of the September meeting, which is going to be the 13th of September. So we're still aiming to deal with that. Okay. So that was the accuracy bit. Matters arising. No? Okay, thank you. Appointment of vice chairs. It is a formality, really. So I'm appointing Tim Huxtable as the minority vice chair and Richard Worrell to continue as the majority vice chair. Okay. The forward plan. People okay with that?
Chair, it's Bob Grintle.
Oh, right, Bob.
With your permission, Chair, thank you. A couple of items, please, in respect to the forward plan. Item 7, I noticed that the first update on Park and Ride programme is not due until the January session. This gives little time for any officer level to encourage them to include a programme of schemes for Solihull. At the present time, the only one I'm aware Transport for West Midlands has been progressing is at Whitlock's Station, although frankly we've not heard anything at all. Can this be brought forward? That's the first item. And another item that doesn't appear on the plan relates to the new West Midland bike hire scheme. It's been successfully the first phase in Solihull Town Centre. There's a lot of support and usage for the scheme, which is great, and we're keen to see this expand and create a more inclusive network. So can I ask that we have an update on the scheme at an early stage? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so you're referring to the January TDC meeting, first of all, Park and Ride?
Correct.
Right. Our delivery monitoring report. We are also looking at a strategic approach to Park and Ride through the Rail and Metro MEG as well. Could that be brought forward? Swapped with something else?
Chair, I think Councillor Huxtable wants to come in. If she wants to come in first, and then I'm happy to respond to both points.
Okay, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Grintle makes a very valid point. But could I suggest that as we hope to restart the briefing meetings, rather than a formal report as scheduled, because as I understand it, there is some way to go in terms of the monitoring, that this could be perhaps picked up as a briefing report, especially as there's so many new members on this committee.
Yeah.
And not only do we look at Park and Ride from a rail and metro perspective, but we also look at it from a sprint perspective and take an update in terms of how it's going to be delivered for the sprint network at all. So I think that would satisfy everyone without altering the forward plan. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, we could do that on the morning of the 15th of November. Right, which would be our earliest opportunity after the September Commonwealth Games session. Is it on the same points, Park and Ride, Chairman?
Okay, almost Tim Huxtable to elaborate. Why you want to have a poll the spring? I thought you never envisaged that going to have a park and ride for the spring. It's only intended for rain or metro, not for spring. So can you then?
Yes, we must have. I think we should be looking at bus stations too. Is it to do with when we can have this briefing on Park and Ride?
Yes, Chair. It's in response to the points that were raised by Councillor Grinstall and Councillor Huxtable. So first of all, just a suggestion, maybe if I may, when the member engagement groups are meeting in the forthcoming weeks around rail and metro and also sprint and bus, of course, wider, that potentially gets impacted by Park and Ride. If we take forward a proposal, a suggestion that there is a briefing paper to come forward around that November date, but maybe just through the member engagement groups, there could be just a discussion around what are the key areas that people want to see and understand that can inform that, and then we can just quantify and clarify that that's the appropriate date and timing, and then a full report will come forward on behalf of all modes, of course, in January.
Yes, okay, fine. Does that suit everybody? Okay. And what was your second point now? I think you started to break up. Oh, sorry, Tim. I thought you were saying okay.
No, I was saying okay, but I just wanted to reply to Chairman Councillor Lau, and Sandeep or Pete will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's always been envisaged that we provide a sprint park and ride along the A34 North in or around the Walsall area in order to maximise the opportunities of sprint. And it was always part of the sprint standards agreed by Transport Delivery Committee that we have a sprint park and ride. So we are just fulfilling that standard incorporated within it. And as mentioned later on in the agenda in terms of the MEG report, that the sprint park and ride will form a chunk of the next sprint MEG being held next week, next Monday, in terms of where we are at it and how we take that forward. But no, I very much welcome the suggestion from Pete as to how to proceed in terms of that briefing to all members regarding multimodal park and ride. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. The sprint MEG is next Monday. Okay. Have the invites gone out yet?
I believe they have, Chair, but I've double checked.
I've not been invited, so
Okay.
all 6 lead members should be invited to each other's MEG.
Chair, I think Sandeep would like to come in on that last point as well.
Sandeep.
Thanks, Chair. And Councillor Huxtable, yes, you are correct. There is provision under phase 2 of sprint along the A34 for consideration for a park and ride, and we will look at that for the other additional future routes as well as part of that. But as Pete says, and the view very much is that this needs to be looked at as part of a multimodal offering, park and ride.
Now, we're not going to have a full discussion on the merits of park and ride here, only that we're going to accommodate it in the forward plan in various ways. And what was the second point? God, I've forgotten now, that Bob raised. Oh, yes, West Midlands Cycle Hire.
And again, thanks, Chair. In terms of the West Midlands Cycle Hire, more than happy to bring an update report. We are producing regular dashboards as well, which show the usage across the region. So we can also arrange for those to be circulated to members of TDC, if that would be helpful.
Good, it would be to all members of the TDC. So thanks for that, Bob. Any other comments on the forward plan? Okay, thank you. Right, financial monitoring report. Pervez, do you want to lead on this? Yep, your officer's not in the room.
No, yeah, Katie's on Teams, so she's there.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chairman, this is the first financial monitoring report for the 2021-22 financial year, reporting income and expenditure up to 31st May 2021. The year-to-date revenue position to the end of May 2021 reflects an overall favourable position of £280,000. The primary driver for this continues to be savings in the child concession budget due to the continued impact of the pandemic, being both reduced service and patronage. There have also been no fare increases. Revision of the accessible transport contract has delivered further savings. These savings are offset by lower than budgeted use for reserves year to date to support the overall budget, as these have not yet been required. Madam Chairman, as to capital budget, the year to date capital expenditure to the end of May 2021 is £26.6 million, which is £13 million behind year to date budget. The key drivers for these variations are: number one, Westbury to Brierley Hill Metro Extension, which is £4.3 million favourable, primarily driven by scheduling of payments to Victoria Steelworks. Number two, Birmingham East Side Metro Extension, which is £2.1 million favourable due to reschedule of subway closure, as well as the commencement date for Schedule 1 works not commenced as planned. Number three, Commonwealth Games Programme, which is £3.5 million favourable due to sprint schemes with A45 Birmingham to Airport and Solihull being £1.6 million favourable, and A34 Walsall to Birmingham being £0.7 million favourable. Works on both schemes are expected to accelerate over the coming months to bring back in line with budget. Number four is other major schemes, which is £1 million favourable. Variance largely relates to future mobility zones, where construction of the survey system has impacted on current expenditure. Number five is minor works, which is £0.4 million favourable, primarily due to spend on CCTV cameras for ADAPT Live Lab not having yet been incurred. And with that, Madam Chairman, I hand over to Kate.
Okay.
She's on Teams.
Kate?
Thank you. Nothing to add from me from the précis that Councillor Attar has given, but welcome to take any questions.
Okay. Pervez, you need to turn your microphone off.
Thanks.
Are there any questions? Can I just query one of the something from Appendix 4 on page 24, other major works programmes, the Connected Autonomous Vehicles test bed. It's not much of a budget, but what is actually going on with that particular piece of work? So I had a briefing on it 2 years ago, because part of the original, the first section of route was running along the boundaries of my ward. Any information on that?
Chair, if I may, don't have a great deal of information. I've been focused on a lot of transport with drivers at the wheel over recent weeks and months. However, we have been in the process of some discussions with our colleagues in policy and strategy around some of the works that have been undertaken, looking at that over in Coventry and in Solihull. So we will take away an action to bring an update, if you would like, from that, because I think it is a relevant piece of work that's that's emerging in the coming months.
Right. Well, I know it's one of the elected mayors, sort of projects, if you like, and I've been to 2 briefings on it now, one pro and one anti. So I've seen various practical angles to it, but I just wondered what the work was that was going on and whether what was discussed with me had actually kicked off yet or not. Are there any other questions? Alan?
Although I brought it up at our engagement group, I would still like to ask again, as it's mentioned in the report. I would like to see the Metro start to run into Dudley prior to running right the way through to Bridie Hill when all the rails are completed to Dudley, because I believe this could be quite a bit sooner than if we wait for the completion.
Well, I would certainly agree. In fact, we did it with the Birmingham City Centre extension, and it seemed silly at the time, but it did make a difference to, you know, for it to run to Bull Street before, and then the next step being down to Grand Central. What are the prospects of that? Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. It is one of the things that we are looking at the moment as part of the phasing for the delivery of the Wednesbury Hill Metro scheme. There is a significant programme review that is being undertaken at the moment, and we should have a better idea of what is possible over the next sort of 4 to 6 weeks. That will also look at some of the programme acceleration aspects as well, so which bits can we bring in quicker. But it is one of the considerations that will be looked at as part of that review.
Thank you. Tim, I saw your hand up. Go up after Alan. And
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. One of the it's also Appendix 4 other major works programmes, and we talk about the cross-city bus Dudley to Druids Heath package, which I wholeheartedly welcome, and it'd be lovely to see the return of cross-city bus services. One of the reasons I believe there's been a lack of expenditure in it is that the City Council has been re-looking both at the proposed capital highways works along the A457 and the A435. And I just wondered if officers could have an update on that and whether there's now been an agreed package of highways capital works along one or either of those routes in order that this can be progressed and the allocated money actually spent. And I'm hesitant on the other one, but where it says the major road network A454 Wolverhampton to Nechells, is that the Birmingham Nechells? Because
Nechells.
Because if it is, it's been spelt incorrectly, and I'm sure that the deliberate mistake that officers always put in to check that I actually read the documents. Thank you, Chair.
A former councillor for Nechells Ward used to refer to it as Nechells. I think she tried to make it seem like an exotic island in the Indian Ocean, far from reality. Well, I've certainly been involved in works along the Dudley Road as part of other schemes. I have to say, we've got all sorts of stuff coming in our direction from Sandwell, using the canals and looking at improvements, linking it to the Icknield Port Loop and so on. And I've only in the last few days received plans, which I haven't looked at thoroughly yet, about the sandpits and Spring Hill area, highway improvements and alterations there, widening of pavements and so on. Is there any further information? Yep.
Chair, if I may just pick up on the point with regards to the cross city that Councillor Huxtable refers. It may also be simpler to provide a briefing around that, because there are different projects around the A457 linked to bus priority that were being progressed, some through Birmingham City Council, some through Transport for West Midlands, through the cross city funds. I can confirm from the cross city funds that were supported through Transport for West Midlands, they are progressing actively with the City Council and moving forward as they are on the A435. But again, there we have multiple schemes that make up that specific, that broad package on the A435 south of Birmingham as well, some of which are moving at different paces. The good point is that they are generally moving forward and progressing, and a lot of those elements are now been moving to full business case through Birmingham's own cabinet approvals, but they are moving at different paces because there are different schemes within that wider package. So I can actually just distinctly bring down between each element of that, so we can share with all councillors where each project is each part of that project is at, if that's helpful.
Hey, Richard.
Yes, just going back to Councillor Taylor's point, just to let people know about the metro extensions Dudley and then on to Bridie Hill. there's more information on that discussion in the action notes, which are the minutes of the Rail and Metro Meg. I've made 10 copies if people are interested in taking those, just to help yourselves afterwards. I think the operative point is that if you do the extension in 2 phases, which sounds like a pretty good idea to me, first to Dudley, then on to Bridie Hill, there is a cost attached and a possible time penalty in ultimate opening of Bridie Hill to Bridie Hill. But that's all in the paperwork here. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman.
Thank you. So it's something on work at the moment, the relaying of the metro line in the city centre, costing £5 million. Was it planned or is something unexpected? And if it was not planned, then will this back up with it or not? And obviously, it's a bit of a controversy as to why the lifespan of the metal lines were so short. Thank you.
Feedback on that? I wasn't at the Rail and Metro group last Monday.
So with regards to the city centre planned line changes, so we're led to inform from Metro that those works will be starting to be undertaken from the end of this week. So the Lower Bull Street area will close on Sunday, allowing for those works to take place over the course of the next 2 months. So ultimately, the budget allocation within Metro will is there to support that and ensure that those works can be taken swiftly. There were some challenges around some of the railheads in the bottom of Corporation Street to support that, and they will be undertaken in a timely way. It is budgeted, it is supported, and will be delivered within this year's financial expenditure.
There were issues with the track which caused a slight delay in the first place, and I can only think, judging from the phrase, it wasn't the Metro Alliance that did the works in the first place, means there's a commercial sensitivity to do with what the work, how the work was carried out in the first place. I don't know why. What is actually wrong with the trucks?
I'll have to check out about the commercial sensitivity on that as well. But I know that there were some challenges around the grading on some of that track from initial installation, which meant that it needed to be replaced. So, but I'm not sure about the commercial arrangements within that.
Yeah, I know that some of the track had to be revisited after they'd done the tests, and that's led to a slight delay in the first place.
Yeah, I think Sandeep may.
Sandeep?
I mean, not to comment on the commercial sensitivity that we'll pick up and come back on, but it is a complex track layout in that location, and the timing, as Pete says, it's within the budget for the works being undertaken. Obviously, there's an opportune time to do that now with the Delta Junction works at the top end of Corporation Street, which will provide the connectivity for the Birmingham East Side extension. So it's just aligning the works to happen at the same time.
I think we get that. I mean, we just want to know why wasn't it done to a satisfactory standard in the first place if they'd already had to revisit a section of it before it could be opened? I mean, that's my query. And again, it's Ladywood Ward, the centre of the universe again. That was Chairman's contribution, and yes, David.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Following up from Councillor Taylor's comment about the extension from Dudley to Bridie Hill, what I would like to know is what is the condition of Parkhead Viaduct at a potential part of that track? And I know there's been concerns over the years about the stability of the structure. So I don't want to prolong the meeting, but I thought I'd mention it at the same time just to find out what the current situation was.
Well, we're just looking at the financial monitoring report. Is there a response to that, please?
Just to say, there are a number. I mean, I don't have the specifics around Parkhead Viaduct, Councillor. I will find that out for you. But there has been a number of works and surveys undertaken for all the structures along the line. They all need to be brought up to standard, which was part of the scope. That was part of the original full business case, which was approved in 2020. But I will double check on the scope of works of Parkhead Viaduct for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody on attending by Teams who would like to contribute? No? They'll be sitting on their settees, having a cup of coffee and... No? Okay. Okay, no more contributions. Thank you for presenting that, Kate and Pervez. Thank you. Let's move to the Cycling Charter Progress Update. And I know that Bob wishes to lead off on this, introduce it.
Thank you. I don't know whether I will lead off, but it is my duty to lead off to present to you, members, the Cycling Charter Progress Report. You'll have no doubt read the papers, as have I. And whilst I was not the incumbent of this lofty position when this was mainly written, I have read it thoroughly. I have had conversations with our officers and therefore I'm happy to put it to the committee for their consideration and noting, but I will now hand over to Hannah Diane, who will present the report in a more fuller manner. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, Bob. Anna?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Consol. I'm just going to share my screen with you and hopefully I can do this. Oops, there we go. So I can't see anyone, but I could see the whole room right now. But I can't see anyone else. So thank you, Chair, and the rest of the committee for letting me to present to you today on the Cycling Charter Progress and the Cycling and Walking Programme for TFWM. We've presented this report on deliverables based on the annual business plan. The first one, the first task is development and promotion of the West Midlands Walking and Cycling Programme. The first item under this is the Transforming Cities Fund programme that was allocated to cycling and walking. 23 million was allocated, and the breakdown for the fund is shown in this table, which includes the Better Streets Community Fund, and a number of cycling routes, and as well as the West Midlands Cycle Hire Scheme. We also have about $1 million of funding towards development of phase 1 local cycling walking infrastructure plan routes. So this is to bring these routes to outline business case, and the breakdown again is shown in this table, with the first of the business cases being submitted this summer. And I just wanted to put a little bit of some imagery to some of the schemes that are being delivered. This is from the Better Streets Community Fund, and how some small schemes can make a really huge impact. So we have a little bit of drop curbing, which allows people to continue to ride on their pedal cycle or use their wheelchair unencumbered. We had resurfacing in a park, and we also had planters put into Soho Road, which makes makes the environment much more pleasant to be around. Also, as part of our deliverables is the Active Travel Fund program. So this is a map of all the schemes here, and also listed in the report. And I wanted to just put a summary here on some aspects of the Active Travel Fund. Of course, and a really important feature is engagement and consultation. So this shows a breakdown of the total number of comments in each local authority for all those schemes, and you can see that they are largely positive. Coventry used their own platform, so we couldn't pull out the positive and negative to compare, but they did have a total of 636 comments. And moving on from ATF sort of infrastructure, we move to delivering across the public transport network. So we have a number of new cycle parking, Moore Street Station, Perry Bar is going to be delivered in May of next year. Wolverhampton and Coventry should be delivered by autumn of this year. And our new street cycle pod opened just last month, and you can see the doors to this. So it's it gets scanned in using a Swift card and is secure with CCTV. And we have our occupancy rates for this year. You can see lockdowns has not been great for cycle parking usage across the network, and it's been pretty stable across 2020, 2021, and we're hoping that with as things open up, people will return to use the cycle parking at the stations. We also have active travel partnerships with British Cycling, Cycling UK, and Living Streets, and those are there's more of description in the report. For British Cycling, there have been 105 led rides with 463 participants. 9 schools have been involved in the Go Ride school coaching program, and that has reached 892 participants, which is very impressive. Cycling UK, we now have 34 affiliated community cycle clubs, and Living Streets have 128 schools participating in their WOW, that's their Walk to School program, which is 17% of the total schools in the region. And there's also now 20 settings recruited to the Little Feet program, which is the early years Walk to Nursery program. We have cycle counters across the network as well. In dark purple are the counters on the canal towpaths. You can see that while on road in white has been lower, leisure rides have increased on off-road and canal towpaths. We have 21 new counters coming. 18 have been now installed, and this is the cherry picker showing the installation here. These are camera-based sensors which use AI to measure cyclists, walkers, as well as cars and buses. So it's a multimodal counter basically. So really looking forward to having a lot new data now. And a little update on West Midlands Cycle Hire. So all 7 local authorities now have launched their pedal bikes. 10% of the fleet will be e-bikes. As of 31st of May, when the last report was done, we have a cumulative total of 39,526 journeys made across the West Midlands. And there are 15,348 users to date. Again, that's towards the end of May. We've started to mobilize for Cycling for Everyone, which is the Commonwealth Games legacy. This will be an activation behavior change package, which supports and complements the mission of the Commonwealth Games and builds on the success of previous programs such as Big Birmingham Bikes, there's bikes missing there, which supported communities in areas of higher deprivation with support as well as free bikes. Right now, it is currently unfunded, and we're still working with DFT and Sport England to scope out funding opportunities. But we are looking at marketing campaigns and a communication campaign as a minimum. In terms of financial, to May 2021, the capital spent to date against the TCF program is 4.762 million. Project spent is committed and is on track to be delivered within the TCF timescale of March 2023. We submitted an application for Local Authority Capability Fund in April, and we're still waiting on the government announcement. And this table shows a breakdown of both tranches and the totals for the Active Travel Fund. It was previously called Emergency Active Travel Fund, but you can see the breakdown of the entire program, which comes out to 16.9 million in total invested into cycling and walking movements. So that's it for the report from me, and I'm happy to take questions.
Richard?
Yeah, thank you. I've cycled for many years, but particularly during the pandemic, I've cycled an awful lot. And my strong preference, illustrated by a horrific on-road fatality in Walsall last week, is not to use the road network. I think there is an issue around policy which says we must put cycle routes on roads. Well, you can't avoid doing that, but on the other hand, there's plenty of opportunity off-road if what's out there in terms of canal towpaths, disused railway lines, green space paths, if that is linked together and made fit for purpose and fully accessible, then you've got the makings of a decent network. We are a million miles away from a coherent, accessible network in the West Midlands at the moment. And one of the things I find quite distasteful is when people in political life try to pretend that great things are happening with cycling and accessibility. I am not convinced that that's the case. There's an awful lot of work to do. Now, I've got a particular thing with disabled access, working with a disabled access campaigner in Walsall, who Hannah knows very well. And let me give you an example. If you were to cycle or wish to cycle on a disabled trike or recumbent from Birmingham to Wolverhampton, there's an ideal way of doing it. It's the Birmingham Mainline Canal, but it simply isn't accessible. Now, with the canal network in the West Midlands, particularly in Black Country and Birmingham, you've got something there ready to go, but there are issues with towpath services which are not adequate and often in bad weather unsafe. You've got a lot of good services, but even where there's good stuff, it only takes one set of steps or some welded up barrier on the canal to prevent disabled access. I mean, I know we've got to prevent or to seek to prevent unauthorised users like off-road bikes and whatever. But on the other hand, if the price of that is to exclude a swathe of the population that really does need access to good open-air exercise, then that's a problem. So just about it, really. One other thing on access, though, Hannah, the bike hire. I mean, I don't think that there's the bicycles or trikes are there for people with a disability. That's not in the portfolio, is it? It's just bikes. We've seen them all, but I haven't seen anything for disabled people. Have you got a view on that? And is something going to be done about making sure that people who would need that kind of hire bike could get access to one as part of the West Midlands scheme? Because if you don't do that, then it's not inclusive. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to reply to? Do you want to? Sorry, you're there. Do you want to reply as we go along, Anna?
Yeah, that if that works for you, I can address comments as they come in. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Worrell, we definitely have a balanced approach to delivering the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. The network does include the canal towpaths and green routes as part of it, and we are looking to develop the network. It takes investment, which is now coming in, and we'll continue to move forward on those, and all routes need to be developed and delivered using LTN 120, which is the new standard from DFT, which makes fully accessible cycle tracks. So we're moving towards that as well. And in terms of West Midlands Cycle Hire, it does include e-bikes, but to my knowledge, in this first round, adapted cycles aren't included just yet.
Chair, can I respond as well, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Worrell, thank you. It's a pity that we didn't have a chance to speak this morning, and you will have learned that my history in cycling is nearly as old as I am, and that's 74 years. I'm still involved in cycling heavily, and when I originally met with officers, one of the first things that I referred to was the accessibility and the already in situ infrastructure that we have with our canal towpaths. It's an area that I personally wish to advance as fast as we possibly can, both for abled and disabled cyclists. I do think that whilst he referred to being a political statement, I actually think he made a political statement. Mine is not a political statement, mine is a cyclist statement. I am all for getting our towpaths and cycleways safe and sustainable for the future, to encourage more and more people to ride bicycles, to walk, to enjoy the environment, not just during COVID, but beyond COVID and beyond. Thank you.
Thanks. David and then Zia.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Chris. And then Chris.
Okay, well, thank you. I must admit, the first I knew about this scheme is when I arrived in Wolverhampton on my way here this morning. I saw some bicycles there, some were missing off the stand, and I was wondering how the scheme operated. And that's really what my question is. You know, I'm completely in the dark. If anyone out there asked me what this was all about after attending the meeting, I would not have a clue how it worked. I'm not quite certain if you could pick one up in Wolverhampton and take it to Walsall, or whether you have to return it back to Wolverhampton. And a lot of the things that Councillor Worrell said is quite true. Some of the towpaths are completely unsuitable, and I think that's where we should be investing and spending the money, of actually making the network itself, you know, to make compatible for all to use. And I do appreciate that anything on the highway can be extremely dangerous with the amount of traffic is there, and of course it will increase as people get back to work. So I really struggling, Madam Chairman. I'd like to learn a lot more about this scheme, and I think we should have sort of some idea of getting together and one of the seminars, whatever, and explain it to us how the scheme actually works. Thank you.
Well, I think that would be a good topic for perhaps a printed update, a written update, just to, you know, find out just how it does work if you wanted to advise anybody or use one yourself.
Yeah, Sandy.
Or Sandy.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. On your comments, Councillor Stanley, around the cycle hire scheme. So this has been about 18 months in procurement. There's been a number of updates that have been brought to TDC and other committees during that time, as well as to CA board. Be more than happy to provide a written update or a presentation on the scheme. It is a region-wide scheme, so it is across the entire West Midlands region, and it is run off it's a service contract that we have with Serco that actually provide the cycle hire scheme, partly funded through the Transforming Cities Fund. But what it is doing is starting to bring some real benefits in terms of local connectivity, local bike availability to the residents of the West Midlands, and obviously piggybacking off the experience from Serco, who run the two other large schemes in the UK, one in London and one in Edinburgh. So really capitalising on that experience. But yes, if the chair is happy, then at a future meeting or separately, we can provide a written update on the cycle hire scheme. Yes. I've already taken away one of the actions to provide the dashboard, so we can get those out to you, so you can see what the usage is across the region. But yes, it's quite a simple system to use, and there is quite a good spread of bikes available. So the 1,500 bikes are now pretty much rolled out across the entire West Midlands. Okay, good. Well, that's just a printed bulletin as to how one would
how you would actually access and use the scheme. That's all, and then we can pass it out to our constituents and colleagues. Sia.
Thank you, Chair. Just thanks, Anna, for your presentation. Just for the clarification, because I think 220, page 30, about consultation, 220 people participated, pop up, the cycle Sellyog to Yardley. So out of the 77% opposing against the 23%. So what will happen to that project? So this is the first one in my query. Second one about the level of cycling from 1.7 to 5% in 2023. First of all, I would like to know the level of people already being active cycling. Throughout the combined authority, I would like to know the ethnicity, how many people from each ethnicity participated each of the 7 combined authority. This is because I'm asking this question. For example, in Birmingham, we have some of the wards really actually health inequality, which we have seen it in Birmingham, for example. So, are you actually encouraging the community, according to their own language, for them to understand and take part of this, the project? Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Hannah.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of schemes that have had negative comments, the local authorities continue to work with the communities to determine where the objections lie and make changes to the schemes as required. So anything specific, I'd have I'll need to ask the council directly if what changes that were made. There was obviously some schemes that were quite contentious and had been removed, but we are trying to work with the communities to determine what the objections are before removing schemes completely from programs, because obviously there is a benefit to the schemes that people can have. In terms of breakdown of the type of people who are cycling, we have the Bike Life report, which was previously published in early 2020, actually just before COVID and lockdowns all happened, and our next report is coming out early, or probably more like mid next year now, and we are conducting surveys. We do have surveys as part of delivery of other programs as well, like such as ATF, where we can get some of that information. But
yeah. Well, looking at pages 41 and 42 at the list of affiliated cycle clubs, I certainly think quite a lot of them are based in multi-ethnic areas, and I can vouch for the Ladywood New Routes Cycle Club on that score. But yes, we'd be interested in some follow-up. Now, Chris. Oh, we can remember your question now.
Sorry, got me in my own world there a second. I should have raised these at an earlier point, actually, but I've got just 2 points of sort of clarification. Page 30, if we look at the page 30 in our agenda pack, I don't know where it is in yours, Hannah, sorry. We've got the replies. In Wolverhampton, we received 42 replies. And that's compared to sort of equal sized boroughs like Walsall or Dudley, where they had 89 or 298. Do we have a reason why that is, or was there a Wolverhampton internal council discussion on it? And one other point of clarification on the Wolverhampton project, sorry, on page 34 in our agenda packs, we have the current delivered bikes and the bikes to be delivered. Wolverhampton, it says we currently have 127 bikes over 8 stations, and that the aim is to have 75 bikes over 9 stations. Is that original 127 an accidental number, or is there actually going to be a reduction of the provided bikes in Wolverhampton? Sorry, thank you.
That's a fair comment.
That's a fair comment. I'll double check. I have a feeling that's supposed to be 75 additional, not a reduction. It definitely won't be reduced and at any location across the region. So I'll just double check on those figures and report back to this group. In terms of number of responses, we promoted across social media. There was also an offline version, so people can can either phone in or do sort of a paper sort of mail-in survey as well. And I think there was quite a push to get more responses, but that, so that was a result. That being said, those are the that was the early engagement. So there'll be sort of another round of consultation with full scheme design. So we'll continue to aim to get obviously more feedback.
I always thought Wolverhampton initially was going to be the first pilot scheme for this bike hire. Chris.
And sorry, a second one, just to come back on that reply, Hannah, sorry. Wolverhampton's currently standing on 127 bikes, according to this report. Might be a question for Sandeep, actually. Why is Wolverhampton's 127 significantly higher than other centres of equal population, such as Walsall and Dudley, which are on under half that amount?
Okay, if I may, Chair, I'll take the question about the bikes and the distribution. So what we've done and what Serco have done is used lots of factors in determining where they can maximise on the usage. I mean, ultimately, the contract that's been set up, Transport for West Midlands, the combined authority, take the revenue risks. So we're trying to put them in locations where we get the most amount of usage. Now, in order to get those number of rides up, make sure that the revenue and the cost of the combined authority, TFWM, remains neutral, they will be constantly looking at where they're actually getting the ridership from. So as we've started rolling the bikes out, we've started to get some really good baseline data now over the past 3-4 months, and we'll continue to use that to adapt and change where the bikes go, making sure that we're coping with demand. Conversely, we don't want to see lots of docks full all the time with bikes that aren't being used at all. So there will be some sort of continual changes and evolution around that. But at the moment, that is based on the best guess on the research and the data that Serco and the team had when they're about to roll out the scheme. But it will continue to evolve over time.
Okay, thank you. So I think we'll move on at this stage. No more comments. Pervez.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to say that all of us here want more walking and more cycling, and obviously it's a very, very good start and well done to officers. But as Councillor Ziaul Islam emphasised, my point is on page 36, Chair, paragraph 6, equality implications, point 6.1, you can see very clear officers accept the issues and the massive problems we have. It says, however, cycling nationally, regionally is unequal, with cyclists more likely being male, young, non-disabled, and white. That's where our challenge is, right? And at the bottom, is, if you see, it says, moreover, promotion of cycling activities and opportunities need to be reflective of the diversity of the region. Now, there we have it. And I think what we need is benchmarking to see how effective we will be within years' time, how much progress we are going to make. And then only we will be now, otherwise we will just be kicking in the air. So let's have some benchmarking. If, say, another paragraph, where we are now, where will be in 6 months' time, as officers said, they will be doing another survey. So if we have a proper benchmarking, I think we can see the progress.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. Is that okay, Hannah? Because I've now got 2 people online who wish to come in. First of all, Celia.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Hannah. Well, what I wanted to flag up is the cycling for everyone, when you talked about cycling for everyone. So my issue or my comment will be, how do we ensure that this is definitely cycling for everyone? I'm hoping that, we seem very, very close to this whole Commonwealth game, but then when you look at it again, we seem very, very far from it. It is close. The Commonwealth game will be upon us within the next 12 months. But to be honest, I was thinking that we will be more involved than just surveys. At the moment, we've just been only used for surveys, if at all. the Cycling for Everyone, I want it to actually be in manifestation, not just a fantastic line, you know. I want us to live it, not just to say it. I want us to breathe it, live it, act it. Cycling for Everyone. So I'm just hoping that the fundings you guys have put through will come to fruition. If it does, I'm suggesting that you guys actually now start making use of us, who are the 7 combined authorities reflected upon the in the TFWM. I want you guys to schedule. I'm more than happy to organize. Sorry, I have to declare a non-pecuniary interest. My master's degree is in sports and exercise science, and I just want to be part of this whole Commonwealth game. Not to talk of coming from the Commonwealth game background myself as well. So I have so many things playing here, and the young kids in our community in Wolverhampton. As much as I know, they are sporty, but we want to make sure we use this opportunity to deepen that relationship between our constituents and sports. And I think Commonwealth Game is a fantastic opportunity to realize that. But we can only realize it if we are committed. And we can only be committed if we're using every single component of what makes up TFWM. At the moment, I'm afraid to say that we're not doing that. So I pray that we get through the funding, and I hope what I've suggested will be taken on board. I need to see an actual event precursor happening here in Wolverhampton. I'm more than happy, like I said, to work with the staff there to put that together. I've done that before when we did the Catch the Bus week. You know, I hosted an event here in my community with the help of the staff there. The chief executive would tell you this. I also helped out when they did the railway event because I wasn't very happy with the whole inclusion and diversity element of it. We were able to bring in the blind community on board, and that was the best rail and metro event we ever had. Anyway, without being, I'm not trying to digress or lose the gravity of what I'm trying to say. So basically, please, I hope you get the funding. When you get the funding, we want to be part of actually making sure that cycling will be for everyone by hosting events here, even if it's a 1-week event, even if it's a mini festival, even if it's a school. You know, I have 4 schools here in my ward. I represent the Penn ward in Wolverhampton. I'm more than happy to set up a 1-week event across those schools, bringing home the whole essence of Commonwealth Game, because we're not going to have it again after it comes here for a very long time. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we take Linda next, and then we can round off with answers to both questions?
Thank you very much, Chair. 2 things. Firstly, we're really lucky in Coventry at the moment in that the towpaths are all being refurbished from Longford, which is my ward, right into the city centre, and they're absolutely great for bike riding on. The issue with them still is the gates, and the gates are meant to stop people with machines like motorbikes riding straight along the towpath. But for anybody in a wheelchair, unless they've got a key with them to actually move directly along the towpath without having to stop, get out, getting stuck, that is still an issue. And it may well be one for the Rivers and Canals Trust rather than yourselves, but nevertheless, it still is an issue. My other issue is when the studies were gone, and this is very much with Ella, Adu, Kissy, Deborah in mind, did we look at how encouraging people to get out and bike ride in areas of heavy density, where there may be a lot of deprivation and where the air quality is not good? If we encourage people to get out, are we sure that any air monitors capture, I'm sorry if there's an echo on this, capture any sort of problems that air quality might bring? Are they at the correct height if we're encouraging children to use walking buses to school? So have we looked at the effect of persuading people to take deeper breaths, doing more exercise in areas of high pollution. And thank you for your presentation. Thank you.
Celia's question. Hannah.
Should I should I go for it? I'll start with Councillor Hibbert's questions and comments, and absolutely, you know, we want it to be for cycling for everyone. We have targets of 1 to 3% of the total population in areas of multiple deprivation. It's going to be a community-led and developed program, yeah, so that's where we are at right now, and like you, we are very much hoping that there is funding that can come through and that we can deliver and, you know, and show what we can do, and the ability to make change and with it. So, and I think we value your experience and knowledge on this. So if I could take offline and be in touch with you, that would be good, to get some, you know, to speak with you more about this, if that is okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you. And then Councillor Bigham on gates and bollards. I'll find out from it would be with Canal and River Trust because they do the delivery on of the schemes. I'll try to find out more about the gates that you mentioned in Coventry. I am aware that they are there, and like you said, to prevent sort of motorized vehicles of any kind to get through. And sometimes I know sometimes removing them can be just as contentious as not having them at all because people are concerned. But I'll speak to them about that particular section that you've mentioned. And in terms of air quality and cycling in areas of poor quality, there have been a few studies that have been done on that, and they found that people exercise, while there can be an impact, it's not as bad as you know, as driving more. So people are driving more because the air quality is poor. People in cars suffer from poor air quality because of being in the car than people outside riding and cycling. But obviously that's just an oversimplification of it all. And, you know, it depends if you have asthma or other, you know, sort of breathing issues. But yeah, there have been quite a number of studies on this.
Hannah, very quickly, am I right in saying that the part of the cycling route is Wolverhampton as well for the Commonwealth Games?
Sorry, which you asked about a specific route?
Yeah, would the cycling go through Wolverhampton as well for the Commonwealth Game?
So the cycling for everyone is regional, so it'll be
no, not cycling for everyone. The cycling activities, the cycling routes for the Commonwealth Game, is Wolverhampton part of the cycling routes? That's what I'm asking.
Racing. The events in the Commonwealth.
Oh, sort of events. That doesn't sort of specific events doesn't sit with us just yet. But I could try to find out what's going on.
I can probably answer that. The answer to that question is no. It doesn't go through Wolverhampton in any way, shape or form. The road race and the time trial, I believe, are based in Warwick, and the track racing is all in London.
Right, we got your answer.
Okay, thank you.
Unfortunately. Okay, right, I think we'll move on now. And I'd like to thank Hannah and Bob for leading off and answering questions on that. Thank you.
Chair.
Right, Rail Business Report, item 10. Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Okay, well, the report is before you. As I mentioned previously, if you want to see the detail or some detail of our discussion, there are copies of the action notes here as they relate to Rail and Metro. So please help yourselves to that. There is also a piece in the MEG report further down the agenda, which is item 13. So I think that Tom Painter might be there, and I'd ask if he might highlight any issues he would wish to bring to the TDC, and obviously he's there to answer questions or take comments. Thank you, Tom.
Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Richard. I hope everyone can see and hear me okay. Yeah, I'm seeing nodding. Fantastic. Right, I'll continue. So there are 5 things probably worth just spending a little bit of time mentioning at this meeting, 4 of which are in the report, and 1 that's a little bit of a hot off the press item. So in no particular order, I'll start with operational performance. And in the period covered by the report that's in your pack, we've actually enjoyed some very strong operational performance, punctuality and reliability. And that's no doubt been helped by the fact that there have been reduced numbers of passengers on the network and fewer services using the network. So there has been less congestion. Where disruption has occurred, it's typically been easier for the rail network to recover it. So delays have lasted for less period of time than maybe they might have done previously. In fact, I think as the report points out, at the end of the financial year that closed on 31st of March, West Midlands Trains actually posted their strongest operational performance figures since 2008, which was a very welcome turnaround from perhaps where we'd been a couple of years ago. Now, that said, as the number of passengers returning to the network has started to grow, and we hope that that will only continue as a result of the reduction in some of the remaining restrictions that's happened today, the network's going to start to come under a little bit more pressure. And the timing for that is rather unfortunate because, as you may have picked up in the media, and both nationally and locally, there is a definite rise in the number of train crew in particular who are off work as a consequence of being contacted via test and trace. So this is a national thing. We understand it's particularly bad on routes like Govia, Thameslink down in the south east of England, but it's certainly not something we're immune from here. And in the space of a fortnight, West Midlands Trains isolations due to the test and trace went from about 10 to over 100. And if that continues to follow the national trend, we might well see those numbers increase before the changes to test and trace occur in August. That would mean that people with 2 vaccinations don't have to self-isolate. So West Midlands Trains are preparing for that eventuality and developing some potential emergency timetables that could be deployed in the event that it comes to the point that there aren't sufficient drivers to work the planned timetable. That's, again, not something affecting the West Midlands specifically. West Midlands Trains also have particular problems down in the south of their route on services to places like Tring, St Albans, Bedford and Bletchley, and so on. So that's something we're keeping a very, very close eye on at the moment. Moving to Williams Shaps, of course, in the period that this report covers, the Williams Shaps Rail Review was published. Greatly anticipated. I think it had been a couple of years in the making. I think many people were worried that perhaps it wouldn't live up to the hype and the billing, but actually I think what was proposed in there was potentially highly transformational for the UK rail industry. And in the report that you have in front of you, there is an appendix that has a detailed briefing note on the Williams Shaps, some of its key points, and some reflections on what it might mean for organisations like ourselves. There are some warm words in there about the working together with local bodies, but it is a little bit light on the detail. And so I don't want to get too carried away. There's clearly an awful lot of work that will still need to happen, engagement with the Williams review team, and then the Great British Railways organisation when that's formed, initially in shadow form, and then when it is properly constituted. And given that this will take primary legislation, I don't anticipate that it'll be until about 2023, 2024 before we have the GBR in its fully fledged form. Moving on to the rail programme, it's been a very productive few weeks actually for the rail programme. If anyone has travelled through Perry Barr and University recently, you'll be able to see that work is very much underway. University, there's some very impressive piling that's taken place and some big steel supports have appeared. There were a couple of possessions that were taken over consecutive Sundays for that, and it really looks like they made the most of that time where the railway was shut. So it's great to see that after so many months and years years talking about these schemes, they're actually happening, and things are really starting to change on the ground. Moving on to the penultimate item, that's the National Rail contract. We are continuing to work to our plan for the National Rail contract. This is the DfT direct award that will succeed the current West Midlands Trains franchise agreement. That's all on track to commence on the 19th of September. The final submission from West Midlands Trains, Abellio, arrived yesterday. So there's a lot of frenzied activity at the moment, both within WMRE and within DfT, just to check that what's in there does meet what we believe we had agreed with the operator over the last 4 weeks or so of negotiation. So that's very much on track, which is pleasing. And then finally, hot off the press item, I think it was last week, certainly the last fortnight, there was the publication of the department's study and recommendations for transport decarbonisation. And there's a good chapter in there on rail. And very encouragingly, the rail chapter backs up Network Rail's own recommendations from the document that they published earlier this year. And in particular, the recommendation that for many routes, including pretty much all the routes in the West Midlands, electrification is the preferred means of decarbonising the network. So I think most people agree that that is the most appropriate form of decarbonisation for the main routes in the West Midlands. So very, very pleasing to see the government starting to move closer to a firm declaration of support for that. Of course, this is only a very high-level strategy document. There aren't definitive dates, timescales, and budgets and things like that agreed for this. But it's really positive, though, that we are starting to move into a space where that comes closer to being a reality. And that's all I'll say, Chair. And Richard, I'm very happy to take any questions.
Any comments or questions, David?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, going to the report, I'm very, very pleased to see the reopening of the Wolverhampton-Walsall line. It should have been done years ago. At least there's progress being made there. It will help on the system tremendously, especially as problems, say, in the section between New Street and Coasley, for example. At least you've got another way through to keep the passengers running. So I'm very pleased to see that on the report. The other question is, and I'm just looking at most of the papers around here, I think it's on page 46. About future opening and restoring of lines, and it mentions Tettenhall. Is that the section referring from, I think it's page 46, Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, is that the section referring from Tettenhall into Wolverhampton via Oxley Sidings? Is that the line we're referring to, which formerly was part of the old Kingsford branch line of the great network of I'll get it right in a minute, of the Great Western Railway. That's what I was trying to think of, so I do beg your pardon there. So is it that particular section from Tettenhall into Wolverhampton through Oxley Sidings you're referring to? Thank you.
Oh gosh, your rail geography knowledge is arguably superior to mine there, Councillor. I can say, though, that I know that it is not Tettenhall as in the original Tettenhall station that closed during the mid part of the last century. So it would be a station on the existing line between Wolverhampton and Shrewsbury.
Which we heard from Councillor Roger Lawrence is not in Tettenhall as such. So it is a misnomer. There you go.
I'm sorry about that, Madam Chairman.
And on Walsall to Wolverhampton, yes, absolutely agree. Sort of strategically, it's absolutely the right fit, and delighted that it's now moving closer to reality.
Any further comments? I think I remember going to a conference at the Wolverhampton Wanderers football ground some years ago now. For the introduction of this new approach to rail, and it promised devolution, not just on a regional basis, but as far as passengers and communities go. And it sort of felt like it was more than getting people to adopt a station and tend to the flower beds. It meant some kind of empowerment to have an input into the running of the railways and in their area and so on. So I just wondered what had happened to that. And secondly, in the last 10 years, I've attended at least two attempts to bring in passenger champions to feed into this devolution and getting the passenger view of services. So I wondered whether there was going to be another plan to bring passengers literally on board, or at least to the table, to start talking about the standard of rail services, as well as commenting on strategic plans and so on.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with the latter question, if that's okay. So the answer is most definitely yes. In the new West Midlands Trains National Rail contract, there's going to be a requirement for them to establish a customer panel. This was something they were on the verge of doing just before the pandemic struck. But then when it did strike, they found it very difficult to recruit. So it was something that's kind of been in abeyance, but it's going to restart, and they're planning on aiming for 5,000 people, which would be fantastic and should give a good, strong, representative view of all different types of rail users across the region. We're hoping that will actually be the springboard for a passenger voice that is operator agnostic. So we actually want to see whether that could be used as the basis for a bit of a sort of passenger champions forum and panel that covers all operators, and so we're getting as broad and holistic an impression from the travelling public of what the rail industry is delivering for them as we possibly can. But that's a further step down the line, and getting this WMT specific panel up and running and fully resourced is the initial priority, and hopefully that'll be something be able to report more on in future once that begins or resumes in earnest, I should say, in autumn of this year. Then on community adoption, it's something that West Midlands Trains have been very active in, which is fantastic. Since West Midlands Trains have had the contract, we've seen the establishment of a new community rail partnership in Worcestershire. There's an event actually taking place at the Worcestershire Guildhall on Friday that's being organised by that partnership. There's also been one established. It's called the Heart of England. We probably know it better as the Snow Hill line from Leamington and Warwick into Birmingham Moor Street station. West Midlands Trains are also looking to see if they can encourage the creation of similar groups for the line out towards Shrewsbury, and also north from Walsall on the Chase line. And then the final thing I'll say, there was something very interesting in the Williams Shapps paper, a sort of an idea floated in there for potentially in some areas having a greater role for groups like the community rail partnerships and station adopters in the specification and then the actual in-life management of services on those lines. Again, like with devolution, there isn't necessarily a huge amount of detail behind that idea, but it really stood out at me as quite a sort of a novel approach in an industry that isn't necessarily always known for being the most imaginative and free thinking. So whether that would necessarily have application on any of the lines in the West Midlands, difficult to say without necessarily having the detail. But I think it's something that lots of people, particularly in the rail community world, will be very interested to learn more about.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Sia, then Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very brief point, it is in my mind, about Perrimar Rail, when it will be reopening, is it before or after the Commonwealth Game? Because I was told by somebody, I can't recall, that it will be in reopening in September or October 2022.
Most definitely before the Commonwealth Games. Should have a really important part to play in the overall transport solution, given it's along with Hampstead the closest station to the Alexander Stadium.
It will be open in its final definitive form for everyday use by the autumn of 2022, but initially for the Commonwealth Games for their purposes. Yeah. Tim?
Thank you very much, Chair. The report is as comprehensive as ever. Just a couple of comments. One, Tom, I've sent to you an email about a local ward issue, so I'd be grateful if you could pick that one up. But talking more strategically, you mention in the paper Kings Norton Railway Station and the restoration of the middle platforms. You mention Snow Hill and the restoration of Platform 4. And these are projects, as you know, I wholeheartedly endorse. The one thing the paper seems to be a little lacking on is where we are in terms of the construction of the Camp Hill cords in and around Camp Hill Island or Bawdsey Island or whatever we're calling it these days. Because it's all very nice getting 3 stations along the Camp Hill line reopened, Hazelwell, Moseley and King's Heath. But I think the biggest benefit that will accrue to the West Midlands region will be if we can construct those cords and run that line into Moore Street and Snow Hill stations. But that does require that very expensive bit of an infrastructure known as the Camp Hill cords. Are you able to give us any update on where we are with that? Because, as I say, it's obviously linked to both the Kings Norton and Snow Hill issues. Thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yes, absolutely agree about the critical nature of the Camp Hill cords. I know we had a good conversation at the last member engagement group. But for the benefit of the wider audience, the Camp Hill cords offer some tremendous benefits, not least helping solve some capacity and connectivity issues between Birmingham, Derby, Birmingham, Leicester, which aren't necessarily addressed by HS2 to the East Midlands, as well, of course, providing a very crucial local role and meaning that we can get even more out of those stations at Moseley, King's Heath, Hazelwell that are being constructed at the moment. But Councillor Huxtable's absolutely right as well that currently there isn't a definitive and defined plan for when that will be delivered and whether it's even funded. And that's something we are looking to try and address. The Mayor is hoping to meet with Grant Shapps shortly, and that's one of the things I believe that he will be bringing up with the Minister to try and get some greater traction within DFT and see if that could be something from the Midlands Rail Hub that is brought forward and delivered sooner, so that we can, as I say, realise some of those benefits sooner rather than later.
Any further comments? Okay, well, thank you, Richard and Tom. Let us move on then. Thank you. Right, we have, as ever these days, a verbal report on the latest on the COVID situation, so that it's actually freshly developed rather than being slightly out of date. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Chair. And who knows, one of these days we may be able to return to a written when we get to a state of play where we are moving into more of a business as usual approach to COVID recovery. A few things to update members and the committee on. Firstly, I think travel advice has been shared as part of the briefing note on face coverings already discussed and shared, so I won't necessarily draw that out given time. However, anybody wants to pick up anything on that, more than happy to. With regards to a few points around the operational updates, just a few bits of relative update in terms of the network, if I may. One of the things that we have been monitoring quite closely is if you like, the level of return on car journeys and car miles as can be apportioned through the RTCC, Regional Traffic Coordination Centre, and others. And in the latest report that we updated, journeys by road slightly reduced across the region in the last couple of weeks, but that could also be associated with, as for schools, weather, general habits and changes. So there's no significant change to any travel patterns there. There are within that some distinct elements where HE are reporting levels of use along the major routes and motorways as well. Tom's already updated, but we've seen some increases in patronage around rail, which, as we were reporting last time, that was very extremely low and flat, but to around 30 to 32% of pre-COVID travel. But of course, there is, again, a varied picture within that across some services on the network. Bus has been quite stable since we last updated at this committee, showing around 66% of pre-COVID journeys. But that's seen some increases and declines during that period as well. So that's again looking at schools and travel. One of the things there, we've seen an increased level of schools where there's been some form of isolations and through track and traces and pings. So that could be attributable to some of those numbers. But it will be very interesting to see how that evolves post the changes today as well. And with regards to Metro, we have seen some returns to patronage levels to be around some areas 80% of pre-COVID. Some days have between the last update and now seen numbers of journeys rise to the levels of pre-COVID. So that has been particularly an area for us to watch. There have been, Tom picked up on the point about impacts from drivers across rail, but also on bus. This has been watched. So if I speak as of today, we have around 3.9% of bus drivers are in some form of either isolation or sickness. Which hasn't had a significant impact across the network, but we have been aware over the last couple of weeks that if it increased above this level, then that would start to see some impacts on services. So we're watching that quite closely as well. On Metro, that's not reporting any specific issues related to the same. Of course, what we will also see, as was mentioned earlier on, is a slight reduction in Metro operations as from this coming Sunday, as the services turn at Bull Street in Birmingham. And they've been operating to a slightly reduced timetable level as well. A wider point, if I may, just on operation and recovery relates to funding. I think this is a significant point that's been being discussed. Funding for rail, of course, is still managed nationally, and that position is managed and looked after from a central government perspective and continues to be so. For Metro, the WMC have now received a letter from the government setting out, if you like, a funding proposal settlement across light rail, which provides a commitment to funding from government to support some of the level of patronage losses that have been being sustained by the authority through the operation of Metro, whilst they've had reduced passenger numbers. Whilst the authority is still predicting a loss during this financial year that will need to be mitigated, this funding is an absolutely welcome development. Nonetheless, still provides for some challenges, but just to be aware that that has been confirmed over the course of the last 7 days. For buses, the Department for Transport have given notice on the national funding. That's for COVID bus service support grant, and that was the grant that was introduced at the start of the pandemic. We've now been given notice that that will end on August the 31st, 2021. In line with an 8-week notice period after social distancing originally was proposed. From September the 1st, it's proposed to move towards something called recovery funding, which is a new approach to funding services from the Department for Transport. And the Treasury have now announced £226 million of funding to bus operators, which will run from September the 1st, 2021 until March 2022. So that's the period of funding that we're currently looking at. This has been communicated to the bus industry, who do currently advise that they don't feel that that is enough to provide full funding for services through that period. But it is worth noting that government say that that is enough funding to manage for that period as well. So there are also risks to the local transport authorities across the country, such as Transport for West Midlands, and they are in line with the fact that bus operators are proposed to be able to make some form of profit potentially during that period as well, which is something we're yet to see the details of from government. Operators may also be able to change their services based on revised levels of patronage, but government are seeking operators to engage with local transport authorities on that process with ourselves to agree such service changes. The challenge for us on that will, of course, be timing, based on the fact that we are now around 44 days away from the changes, but there is a 70-day registration process to make service changes. So we're already well into that period. and we don't yet know the basis under which that funding will operate. So there are challenges for us based on that timescale and the uncertainty that exists around both the scale and the quantum of the overall funding, and the fact that government have stated that this will be an overall figure which will not increase regardless of any risk. So in other words, that 226 million is proposed to be a bottom line for the funding that government will provide. So if it was deemed that services couldn't be operated within that window, we're informed there is no further funding to provide on that. So I think the point for today, and TDC should be clear on, is that the risk here to us is currently that National Express is the main bus operator, but in line with other bus operators, have highlighted to government directly that there is a potential for a funding risk of up to circa £15 million for this region, and which that is a funding amount and quantum that TfWM are looking to corroborate and mitigate with direct dialogue through the Department for Transport, which we have started and are in open dialogue with them, and alongside bus operators, the DfT and the West Midlands Bus Alliance. It is also clear, though, that the risk is either that if there is a budget pressure, that creates a potential budget pressure for the West Midlands Combined Authority, or a threat to bus service cuts, which we need to be really, really clear on. And this could happen between now and the time, or be set out on now, between now and the time of the next TDC meeting. So I really wanted to be clear with members on this verbal update of what we are doing to manage and mitigate that risk. But there could be further communications about that matter in the coming days or weeks outside of this meeting. I'll keep it to that, Chair, and hopefully that provides a helpful overview. I'm happy to pick up any questions around it.
Tim and David.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just one possible omission from Pete. Apologies if you mentioned it, Pete, but that was a very comprehensive update. The approval by the Solihull Council Cabinet regarding sprint along the A45 in Solihull, and the good news that will actually bring TfWM. I don't know if you wanted to expand on that.
I will ask Sandeep to update on that, but to be honest, just to be clear, I mean, the COVID operational update is just to provide some updates around COVID, but absolutely, Councillor, we would be more than happy to update on some good news as well. So, Sandeep, do you just pick up on that one?
Thank you, Councillor Huxtable. So yes, we presented a paper through Solihull Cabinet a couple of weeks ago around the delivery of the phase 1 infrastructure. So that's a number of stops which will be installed as part of the phase 1 delivery of Sprint. That is largely shelter installations and some curb line realignments to allow for both Sprint services and the articulated vehicles when they do follow on in the future. We will work with Solihull officers on the actual delivery mechanism, i.e. will it be through Solihull's own contractors or TfWMs, but yes, a positive step forward. We're also continuing to work with Solihull on the phase 2 aspects of Sprint, which are still being refined with local authorities.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Bond, would you like to say a few words about the reduction in fares that are liable to take place within the West Midlands with the operators? This, of course, does affect COVID because it's to try to get the passengers back on the buses that they lost in the process of the COVID outbreak.
Indeed, Councillor, and actually there has been some significant press activity around that just last week as well. So led through initially a fares reduction proposal through National Express as the major bus operator, but also then supported